We're live, here we go. All right, so I was all prepared to give a martial arts, kind of a martial arts related talk about decisiveness. And then Miss Macy asked me if I could talk about kindness. So I became indecisive, and then I became decisive quickly and decided to talk about kindness instead. I never talk about stuff like kindness because I always think we're in a martial arts school. We got to talk about serious stuff like, enlightenment, not being attached to things, being decisive, kicking people in the groin, that kind of thing. But kindness is a very important part of our practice. So you hear me talk all the time about what it is to be a great partner rather than an opponent. That is kind of the basic level that we talk about it all the time. And I absolutely believe this, and I get people who I know, you don't quite roll your eyes when I start talking about it because you have decent etiquette, but some of you want to roll your eyes and you start and you go, oh no, I'm in the dojo, I can't roll my eyes right now. See if you can see me. But I truly mean that you've got to be a great partner to everybody, not just in the dojo, but also outside the dojo. And this comes down to, on some level, like what kind of human being do you want to be and how do you want to lead your life and live your life? If you want to live your life always as an opponent and always going against people and against the world and thinking that everybody is always against you, that's just not a very fun way to be in the world. So I think that there are great lessons in what we practice all the time to becoming a great partner, to just being kind. And I just jotted down a couple of things, but I want to also do a reading from, actually two, from Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which is one of my favorite books of all time. The first thing I wrote down is something that you guys have heard before, but it's very simple and it's very true. Kindness costs nothing. It's one of the few things that you can really just give to somebody, and it takes absolutely nothing from you. And in fact, I think that it leaves you with more. It kind of makes you richer, and when you are kind to somebody else, sometimes it's repaid in somebody else's kindness, but it leaves you feeling better about yourself and better about the world, and kind of like takes away some stress. Like being mean to somebody causes you to be stressed out. Being kind causes you to relax and just be happier and calm. So I think that if you're looking at it that way and you recognize, like, this interaction is going to leave me richer, it's going to leave me with more if I'm kind to this person, then just do it. It's a lot easier. Kindness, I think sometimes in terms of, like, if I see somebody on the street, somebody who's homeless, somebody who's in need, I think of kindness in terms of that person. Like, what does that person need? And this is going to be totally painting with a very broad brush, but you can think of it in terms of maybe an individual who you've met at some time, either out in the world or in your life, and you think, like, this person, sometimes they need something. Sometimes the best thing to do is to give them food. Maybe they do need money. I personally don't like to give money to strangers because I don't know what they're going to do with it, but I find giving people food. And I was out at a restaurant down the street a couple months ago, and a guy was asking for money, and I was like, well, what do you want? I'll buy you something. He says, I just want a cookie. And so I was going to take him into the
Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, but it was the Chinese. Did I tell you this story already? Okay, great. I don't need to tell it again. No, I was going to go into the store to buy him a cookie, but they closed down and they wouldn't let us in. So then I went to the Chinese restaurant to buy him a cookie, and they said you have to buy a whole meal. So I ended up buying this guy like fish and rice and like vegetables, and he probably threw all of it out and just ate the fortune cookie, but he got it. And I gotta say, it felt good to just give somebody something that he needed. I knew that he needed it because he looked really hungry and appreciative. Sometimes being kind to somebody might mean instead of giving something, you're taking something from them. Like you might So first of all, just like receiving something from somebody else can be gracious and kind. Somebody's trying to give you something, it's a gift, it's a kind word or whatever. I mean, sometimes we are terrible at accepting compliments. We're terrible at accepting just general kindness from people. We think that we're not worth it. But oftentimes it is like the nicest thing that you can do for somebody else to accept their kindness. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm going to talk about like if somebody needs you to take something from them, like they're doing drugs and you need to take their drugs away from them, or they're about to kill somebody and you take their knife away from them, or whatever else it is, like whatever harm it is that they are about to do to themselves or somebody else, sometimes that is the best kindness that you can do. And this is kind of a way to look at, the very dangerous and painful and damaging techniques that we learn to do to people sometimes might be the nicest thing that we could do in that situation. This person is about to try to kill you, and all you do is break their knee and send them to the hospital, and they can wake up and think about their lives rather than waking up in jail for the rest of their lives. So that's, a whole other talk. But in any case, just think of it as sometimes giving and sometimes taking. And it is, a two-way street, kindness. I think it's important to be able to know when to do which one and whatever, variation they're in. Sometimes we're not sure what to do, and you have to be decisive. But if you find yourself unsure of, what is the best course of action here to be kind with this person? What does this person need from me? I think it's important to be able to connect yourself to your higher self, kind of like what we were talking about in last week's meditation talk and the question and answer. And, the ways that we do that are various, but going back to the breath, meditating regularly, just thinking about somebody who's an inspiration to you, or reading something inspirational. So I'll give one example that is, I actually read this story like several times a year because it's one of my favorites. But this is, if I can find it, this is called "The Moon Cannot Be Stolen." Ryokan, a Zen master, lived in the simplest kind of life in a little hut in the foot of a mountain. One evening a thief visited his hut, only to discover there was nothing in it to steal. Ryokan returned and caught him. "You may have come a long way to visit me," he told the prowler, "and you should not return empty-handed. Please take my clothes as a gift." The thief was bewildered. He took the clothes and slunk away. Ryokan sat naked, watching the moon. "Poor fellow," he mused. "I wish I could give him this beautiful moon." And that's like an example of giving somebody something in kindness, but there's always something more that we can give. And just the fact that this man's consciousness was at that level where he can think of, this person's trying to steal from me, and like I can't even give him as much as I want to give him. I think if we read things like this that inspire us, or we look to the lives and the personalities of people who really exhibit how we want to be and who we want to become, it can be easier to show people kindness and to recognize, like, when I am faced with this kind of person or with this kind of action, do I need to take it and meet it back with equal force, or can I accept it in and meet it with equal kindness? And it's so tough to be driving down the street and have somebody cut you off and meet them with kindness and like recognize, you know what? I maybe would have done that if I were in a bad mood or in a rush, or I can remember the last time I did that, rather than flipping them off or trying to speed up and cut them off again. I know some of you have done that before because I've done it, and I'm a generally calm person when I drive. But it's like, when we have this energy, we talk about this in class from time to time. This punch is coming in, and there are different ways of dealing with it. We can get hit with it, which is the worst thing to do. And if we're out there in the world, it can hit us out of nowhere. The next thing to do would be to block it and kind of stop it, like, power against power, which is better than just getting hit and destroyed by whatever that kind of negative energy is, but it's also still adding a little bit of our own, negativity to it to try to repel it. And then you've got better options like being able to completely move out of the way and avoid and dodge the situation, or the best one yet, to be able to accept. So you see the punch coming in and you accept it and absorb the energy, and you're able to play with the energy. And if we are actually able to do that with our partners in the dojo, that's amazing, because it's difficult to be that sensitive and relaxed to accept the energy that somebody's giving us to the point where we can actually play with it. And it's a whole other thing to be able to do that outside of the dojo, but we practice it to some degree in here, often, so that we can try to take it out there. And that sensitivity and awareness to what this person needs and what is going to make the biggest difference to them right now is huge. And it comes from, I'm kind of skipping ahead to what I was going to talk about later, but it comes from two main things. This ability to be totally kind and give this other person what they really need. It comes from complete, I wrote it down, it's a good thing that I did. Confidence, that's the word. You have to be completely confident. And it's, for example, if they're throwing this punch at you in the dojo, for you to be able to do this technique that requires a lot of skill and likely experience, you have to be confident in it. You have to know that you can pull it off. You have to be confident in yourself. If you're not truly confident in yourself, you can't really offer anybody else anything in terms of kindness or whatever they need in that moment. So we develop that confidence, and this goes hand in hand with the other thing, which is selflessness. If we're thinking about ourselves and we're thinking like, I'm going to be kind, but only if I can get something back out of it, that's not going to be true kindness or any kind of true interaction with anybody. We have to be truly selfless, and from that is going to be like the highest possible act of kindness. It's going to be the best possible outcome from that situation. And confidence and selflessness go hand in hand. They really relate to each other. Sometimes I might not feel really confident, but I can be that way. I can be confident in this situation if I'm acting from a place of selflessness. I can be my best, highest self if it's not about me at all. And this is a big thing that we practice in class all the time, is being able to get ourselves out of the equation and out of the situation. This is when we practice meditation. This is when we're trying to get into Mushin, the state of no mind, where we recognize if I'm here, if I'm in the way, then the best possible outcome cannot happen. If I'm in the way, I'm going to somehow be stopping it or, fudging this thing up. But if I set myself out of the way and am truly selfless, then I can kind of stand in that. There's a real confidence in that. And I'll know what to do. And it can go the other way too. It's sometimes hard to be selfless unless you can be confident in that and know that, like, I have the ability to give this person what they truly need without inserting myself in it. So look at those two things. If you're really looking to be kind to somebody in a specific situation or in general, think about it. Am I standing in a place of confidence? Am I standing in a place of selflessness and acting from that, rather than from a place of me being in the way, inserting myself where I don't need to be, or from a place of what am I going to get out of it? Because really both of those are interacting with the world from your small self rather than from your biggest self. I've got another great story in here, which is just kind of a funny one, but we're going to do it. So this one is called No Loving Kindness. There was an old woman in China who had supported a monk for over 20 years. She had built a little hut for him and fed him while he was meditating. Finally, she wondered just what progress he had made in all this time. To find out, she obtained the help of a girl rich in desire. Go and embrace him, she told her, and then ask him suddenly, what now? The girl called upon the monk and without much ado caressed him, asking him what he was going to do about it. An old tree grows on a cold rock in winter, replied the monk somewhat poetically. Nowhere is there any warmth. The girl returned and related what he had said. To think I fed that fellow for 20 years, exclaimed the old woman in anger. He showed no consideration for your need, no disposition to explain your condition. He need not have responded to passion, but at least he could have evidenced some compassion. She at once went to the hut of the monk and burned it down. So, I don't know if the woman was necessarily showing kindness. It may have been what that monk needed. Like, get off it, man. I don't know if you're making the kind of progress that you really think that you're making. But for sure, you could say that the monk wasn't really showing that woman what she needed. Now, it's possible that this monk was on some other state that we can't possibly comprehend, but most of us think like, yeah, that's what I would want to do. If I was a monk and I was sitting in my hut and some, woman came at me, I would just be able to sit there and show absolutely no response to it whatsoever. But that's about yourself. That was like about the monk. It's like him being able to prove to himself that I can handle this and like not let myself be distracted. But the situation doesn't have to be about you. It can be about this other person. So he didn't really offer the woman who came to him anything at all. He was just like all about him. It reminds me about this other story that's also in this book that I'm not going to try to find right now and flip to, but it's probably my favorite one that I read all the time, which is the two monks who are walking down the street and they come to a river, or in this book I think it's a muddy path, but they find a woman standing there. She's unable to get over the river, and the one monk just puts her on his shoulder and wades across the river, sets her down, and they continue on their way. And after hours, the monk who was walking with that monk couldn't handle it anymore, and he said, why did you do that? We're not allowed to look at women or talk to them, let alone touch them and carry them on our shoulders. And the first monk said, brother, you've been carrying her along this whole way, and I set her down way back at the river. And it's like that kind of selfless but practical pragmaticism that allows you to just be in that moment totally selfless and not really worrying about yourself. I mean, if most of us had been in that situation, especially with our other monk who's there watching us, we might have thought twice about helping somebody in that situation if it meant we were going to hear it, for the rest of the trip. But he didn't put any thought to that. It was just like, what can I do for this person right now? What is the best thing for me to do to help this other person? Standing in confidence and standing in selflessness. So I think we have to also be willing to make mistakes. To be kind is to kind of put yourself out there and to be willing to sometimes get rejected and to be willing to look dumb and to be willing to mess up. And that's where the confidence comes in, and that's where the selflessness comes in. Because sometimes being kind is like the biggest possible act for us in any given situation, and it is oftentimes the hardest possible thing for us to do. So when we do it, it really is like a form of transcending the ego and transcending the small self and just being your biggest possible self. I think that's everything that I wanted to say about this. Yeah. So, well, there's also another thing that I didn't think about, but I'll say it now. Kindness, we have to be kind to ourselves also. And if you're unable to be kind to yourself, it's very difficult to be kind to somebody else. And to be sensitive to what you truly need in any given situation doesn't have to be mutually exclusive also to what somebody else needs. Oftentimes there's this, what do they call it in game theory? It's the, you don't know about game theory? I found something you don't know about, Catherine? It's like the equilibrium. It's the high, what is it?
Zero-sum?
Well, you're in a zero-sum game, but it doesn't mean, no, you're not in a zero-sum game. I took a game theory class. I should know this. Anyways, it's like, it can be win-win, right? We often think of it as like win-lose, or I lose and the other person wins, but it can be win-win. And it takes a little bit of creativity to find that. But to show kindness to ourselves could be a lot of different things. I think setting aside the time to meditate, setting aside the time to set aside everything else and just be with yourself and like truly know, like, what is the best thing for me? What can I do to take care of myself now so that when I do go out in the world, then I've got something for everybody else, is so important. And we are oftentimes the meanest to ourselves. Like, we talk to ourselves more trash than we would ever let anybody else talk to ourselves. Or we'd let somebody else talk trash to us, and then we'd say, that's right, I do suck, and then you'd like repeat it over and over again. But if we do that, that's obviously not being kind, but it's also not preparing ourselves to be the best that we can be for the rest of the world. So I think of this all the time. I think of, I want to give. I always want to give and be the best that I can, give the most that I can to everybody else. And sometimes that shows up in unhelpful ways, like being unable to say no to somebody, overextending myself so that I end up with nothing left. And oftentimes what is needed is to know your own limitations, to know, how can I actually take the best care of myself so that I am my best, so I am at my best for the rest of the world. So meditation is a huge part of that. Setting aside the time to come and practice is a huge part of that. And when we meditate today, let's go into that with the understanding that I'm sitting right now to get my mind in the best possible state, to give myself the best possibility of being my best for everybody else. So I'm really meditating for the whole world or the whole universe when I'm showing myself this kindness in this moment, to just allow myself to sit and not worry about anything. And I invite you guys to try this thing out that I've been doing lately, which is imagine that this is the last meditation that you're ever going to do. Not to stress yourself out about it, but think like, when I'm done with this meditation, I'm dead. I cease to exist. So all of that other stuff that you're worried about now, that you think, I got to be able to do this, or I got to leave and do that, just when you're sitting, do it from this place of nothing else matters because nothing else exists, because this meditation is it. Like, this is absolutely going to be the end of everything. And that's going to give you a little bit more intensity in your meditation, a little bit better direction, and a little bit more focus. So think of this kindness that you're doing yourself and the kindness that you're doing the rest of the world by just sitting and being in stillness. Sit comfortably.